Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm the host of this show. And I'm always in exploration for you to find people who are going to help you to think differently, to look at the way you look at your day and your week differently so that you can take back time. And that means working smarter because you can't really get time back, but you can make sure that you are working with it as most effectively as possible. So today I have Joe Sanok with us, and he's the author of Thursday is the New Friday. And I really like that. We were just, as we were getting on, saying that the 45 is the new 60 in terms of minutes. So we'll have to talk about that. And it's really how to work fewer hours, make more money, and spend time doing what you want. I love that. The book examines how the 4-day work week boosts creativity and productivity. So we're going to talk about that today for sure. And he's been featured on Forbes, Good Magazine, Smart and Passive Income podcast. And he's the host of a popular podcast, The Practice of the Practice podcast, which is recognized as one of the top 50 podcasts worldwide with over 100,000 downloads each month. And best-selling authors, experts, and scholars and business leaders, innovators are featured on that show. And without further ado, Joe, welcome to our show.
Penny, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us your story, Joe. How did you become the author and promoter of the 4-day work week?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a return home rather than kind of a next step or a trajectory. I remember my freshman orientation. So I'm a senior in high school, go down to school for the weekend to get my classes going and meet all these people. And the academic advisor said, all right, we're going to make your class schedule for the fall. And I raised my hand and said, do I have to take classes on Friday? She's like, no, this is college. Do whatever you want. If you don't want to get up at 8 a.m., don't schedule an 8 a.m. I said, great. So throughout all of my undergraduate and graduate work, I never had a Friday class except for one mandatory class my junior year of college. And so really kind of living that throughout college. I then entered into my first job as a psychologist working at a place. It was a residential treatment center and very traditional kind of trajectory for the counseling and nonprofit world. And they offered me the job. And I said to him, I'd love to do a 4-day work week. The guy that interviewed me stepped out of the room and came back in and he said, we can do that. And so my first job, I had the 4-day work week. But then
Fantastic.
I got
you
typical.
Asked for it and you got it.
I know. And I was like, 25 with a master's degree. I thought, this is amazing. And so as I entered into the work world, I got busier. I did the typical 40-hour work week, got into the 5 days, eventually worked at a community college. Fast forward about 10 years, and I was working the 40 hours plus my side gig of 15 hours. I had a counseling practice and very quickly was hitting that 50 hours a week really easily. And then in 2015, I looked at my private practice, looked at my podcast and said, I'm making more in this side gig, 10 to 15 hours a week than I am in my 40-hour a week job. And used the Family Medical Leave Act when my second daughter was born to just test out whether leaving that full-time job might be a fit. And it worked. I ended up leaving in the summer of 2015. And when I was then able to have my own schedule again, I said, I'm going to go back to kind of those college days. And for that summer, decided I'll do a 4-day work week, just see how it goes as an experiment. And then looked at the numbers. And June of 2015 was the best month I had ever had financially. July was even better than that. And August was better than that. And so very quickly said, this is not an experiment anymore. This is how I'm going to live it. And so I have continued to live that and do even more time experiments since then and showed my clients and different consulting folks how to implement it within their businesses.
Fantastic. What I think is really valuable, right, is going back to that shift from high school to college where you actually had the ability to plan your schedule, right? And you did it the way that you wanted. The thing is that a lot of people don't. Right? A lot of people have more ability to schedule their time the way that they want to, and they don't. So let's talk about that first. Like, Why don't we do what is actually within our control? Why do we allow other forces to stop us from doing that?
I think a lot of it is when we look at the history of the industrialists, what they gave us is they taught us that everything's a blueprint. Everybody's the same. Plug them in. They're like a robot, the assembly line. We've bought into that idea that things are how they are because it's how they are. And really, I think if anything has been learned from the pandemic of 2020 and 2021 is that a lot of the things that we thought were really stable actually are more shaky than we actually believe. And so that's why we're seeing this great resignation right now is people are being asked to come back and have their 40 hours be the key performance indicator of butts in the chair rather than, hey, let's look at outcomes. Let's look at our passions, our excitements. And people are saying, I'm not going to go back to that kind of job. And I think employers are oftentimes saying, like, what do I even do with this? And that's really the shift away from that industrialist way of thinking, of having a more organic way of thinking about our employees, but also our businesses to let them grow and shape over time. And so when people enter into the work world, we're not taught, here's how much autonomy you could have. How much value do you actually bring? So much of it has been, hopefully you get through that interview and you get offered the job. And then you're just thankful to have got maybe a job that you are looking forward to. You don't want to push back at that point.
Well, there's so much there that we could talk about, but I want to go back to that point of why aren't we doing what we know? And I'm talking more about people who have that ability, like entrepreneurs who they run their business, they have the ability. And so you're saying that you think that a lot of it is from sort of passed along from this industrialist way of living. I believe that there's something to that, but I think that there's this ever pressure of producing and that it's fear, right? It's that fear of missing out. I was actually thinking today, I'm constantly having people tell me, oh, Instagram's the way to go. You got to be an Instagram specialist. You got to be a LinkedIn specialist. You got to have this tool. You've got to do that. You got to do that. And it becomes overwhelming and that people are just dabbling in all of these different things because they are in the fear of missing out is causing them to overwork and actually paradoxically reduce their productivity and actually miss out on the things that are most important to them.
Yeah. I mean, when we're burned out and stressed out, is that when we're going to do our best work? You know, you see this hustle culture right now where people brag about how they've worked every Saturday since they were 14. And it becomes an ego thing more than anything. And to me, I see those people and I say, if you're working that hard, you're really bad at business, or you don't have a whole lot going on in your life where you're running away from some other emotion. And I mean, as a psychologist and counselor, I was like, what are you avoiding there that you just feel like you have to work and be productive? But is that really what we want to call productivity, is just making money? So I would actually say that one big factor is the overvalue of work and the undervalue of fun. To really see that time outside of our work, for one, recharging our brains and helping us do better work and more creative work, but also to have those experiences for the sake of those experiences. Everything outside of our work doesn't have to serve the work. So every Wednesday night, I do improv with a local improv troupe. I laugh harder than I do the rest of the week. Thursday, I don't have to do any ab workouts because it's just like I laugh so hard on Wednesday nights. And it's for the sake of laughing. It's for the sake of having fun and pushing myself. And even just last night when we did improv, they introduced a new game where it was this like singing and dancing game. And I was like nervous for the first time in a long time. And how often do I get to feel nervous? And it also helps me in a lot of other ways in my business. It's not the reason that I do improv, but there are ancillary things that help me out in my business, to think on my feet, to be more okay when things fall apart, to joke about things, especially when they fall apart, to say yes. And when we start to add these things in outside of our business, it actually makes us a more interesting business person because we have a life outside of just this lane that we've been in for so long.
Absolutely. I agree. I'm a big fan of improv too. I've done a number of improv courses and it's just fun. We need to bring more fun and joy in our lives. And when we do, we're going to work smarter just as a result of being more relaxed, more connected to ourselves and to others, and just be able to apply that joy and fun in what we're doing. So I agree. And I still think that it's this impulsive problem that people have. So I guess it's fear. I heard this term once before, and it's feel the fear and do it anyway. So feel the fear of missing out or whatever it is, but putting that structure in place. I believe also if you just say, okay, that's what it is that Fridays is my day to do whatever it is that brings me joy. And then you've got a structure in place that supports you, right?
Yeah. And I think especially achiever types, you need to plan those things in. Otherwise, you're just going to default to going back to the things that you're working on. And so to put in, whether it's the improv class, a hike with a friend, a coffee date with yourself, working out, and making sure that you have a gym buddy that is counting on you, to really schedule those things in for a while before you just kind of leave yourself to your own devices. And I would also say that we see that really taking small steps is really effective. There's one thing that has really resonated with people, and that's the idea of on a weekend to add one thing and remove one thing, really as an experiment. So what do I mean by that? To add one thing in that you think is probably going to give you a spark of joy. So maybe there's a novel that's on your nightstand. It's been there for months, but you keep telling yourself, I should read my business books. I should read my entrepreneur books, but you kind of want to read that. Maybe schedule 2 hours on Saturday morning to get some green tea, get that novel and set it up where the kids are taken care of or whatever else, and give yourself that permission to really try that out. Maybe schedule a time with that friend that you always say, we should get together someday. That someday just never comes. And then remove one thing from the weekend as an experiment. And so it may be that you have a coffee date with a friend, but every time you hang out with that friend, you just feel like trash. There's just like a toxic friend. You're old enough to not hang out with toxic people anymore. You're allowed to remove that from your weekend. Or maybe you've got some yard work that you need to do. Maybe have the neighbor kid do that. Take that off your plate, or have those groceries delivered this weekend and do it as an experiment. Don't say, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. Just say, okay, how did I feel this weekend? I read for 2 hours and that just felt amazing. I loved it. And I had my groceries delivered. It wasn't that big of a deal. I actually like grocery shopping. Get away from the kids for a little bit. And so you may find over time those things that really help your brain slow down first. And then when you enter into the week, you can absolutely kill it, whether or not you've already moved to a 3-day weekend.
I love that you used experiment, that you did this experiment for yourself and you're encouraging other people to experiment. There's something inviting to an experiment, right? In the language and in the way that it is, that allows people to play with it as opposed to commit to it. Does that make sense? Like there's something, don't make me commit to, there's something, I think there's something to those words that make a big difference for people.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that shift in society when you look at a macro scale. Henry Ford gave us the 40-hour work week in 1926. So less than 100 years ago, this thing that feels so solid to us came into society. Before that, people were working 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So it was needed at the time. And then you look at our mindsets, we no longer think that everybody thinks the same way. We no longer think that we can just plug people in. We have this nuance within us. And so the shift that we're seeing, especially in writing and teaching, is that we used to have these 5 steps to be more productive type of books that were very prescriptive. They were very industrialist focused. Or we might have kind of a woo-woo book that says, make a vision board, manifest it to the universe, and hope that trip to Hawaii happens. And both had some truth to it, but we knew intuitively that it just wasn't really where we should land as humans. And the new type of book, the new type of thinking is this experimental model where we look at books and information more as a menu to try it out, to see if it works for us. So when companies consult with me and we look at shifting to the 4-day work week, one team's 4-day work week might look completely different than another team's. A bank who maybe there's an IT team that oversees the IT for 10 different locations, they're going to have a different way that they approach it than another team, because you can't just say, sorry, it's Friday, you're locked out of your password, you can't get into your bank account. There needs to be checks and balances and overlap. So that's going to look differently. And so being able to test it and iterate and improve over time, almost like artificial intelligence, it helps us do better work rather than just going back to that old prescriptive model.
Right. And some people might rather take Monday off, right? I mean, you can balance that in the organization. I think they're finding that today, as people are saying they're going back hybrid and they can go back 3 days a week or whatever, or 4 days a week, or how they're doing it. And that allows them to make their schedule a little bit more, to add the days that they want to be more flexible. Like when I was working in Zurich, Switzerland in a management team, and I had just had my son, I also negotiated that I only wanted to work 4 days a week. And Wednesday was the day that I wanted to be home because it kind of split up the week really nicely for me. And so I liked Wednesday, right? So it gives people flexibility to choose which day is going to be that day for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the research is so early right now, because the pandemic really made us globally say, why are we working this way? That we're seeing all sorts of global experiments being done with different companies where folks are reporting that out publicly. So you look at the Iceland study, there was a multi-year study, multidisciplinary. So it's across tons of different industries, 2,500 people, largest study of its kind. that found that a 4-day, 32-hour work week, so it wasn't cramming 40 hours into 4, was more productive than a 40-hour week, meaning those last 8 hours are more like a hobby. And do you want that hobby to be at work or that hobby to be at home? They were healthier, they were happier, their overall outcomes just were better. So we're seeing these things emerge where places like Kickstarter are saying in 2022, we're going to try the 4-day work week. We see that Microsoft Japan tried the 4-day work week. We see that countries like Spain and Portugal and New Zealand are trying these approaches. And so as we get more data and as we get more application, we're going to see trends in what works with different teams and with different cultures so that it's not a one size fits all, but there's global principles that the research points to.
Right. Well, and I used to live in Europe and France has been doing it for some time. So, and then there's the thing where companies say that, but they're not really for that. And so you're shaking your head like you've seen that, right? So it's more that they're doing it for publicity. So in the beginning, when France did move to this as sort of a blanket, I remember my IT company was bought out by this French company. And in asking some of the people there, they were like, oh, no way would we ever actually only work 4 days, because even though it was mandated, it wasn't appreciated kind of thing, if that makes sense. And so is that just sort of the growing pains of moving into it and shifting mindsets? Is that what that is starting with that? Not everybody's in acceptance. Some bosses say you have to work and then eventually they get on board. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, I think there's a natural kind of decision-making process that happens in those situations where some people are just locked into that old way of thinking and they're just not going to change. And I think as an individual, you have to ask yourself, do I want to work for this person if they're not willing to experiment with it? The companies that are more effective now are saying, let's do an experiment around it. Let's try this for a quarter. Here's the boundaries that the team will have each week, reflecting back on those boundaries of how well people followed them and then adjusting and shaping over time. For example, if say Jim from accounting sent everyone email at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday and half the team checked it, and Thursday morning, half the team feels left out. We need to have that conversation. It may be that Jim from accounting gets some really important information every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. And we all need to commit to from 9 to 9:15 p.m. We all have to check this so we're ready for Thursday mornings. We adapt and change the culture. But I think that a lot of the supervisors or C-suite folks, they haven't lived it. They haven't tried it. They haven't seen the data. And we need to be able to, from a qualitative kind of heart side, be able to speak to it, but also from a quantitative numbers side to say, look, we did a 32-hour week experiment. Our numbers were higher than before. And here's the actual data. Because oftentimes what's happening is when we actually look at productivity amongst a 5-day work week, people are wasting that time anyway. They're chatting at the cooler. They're spending more time on email than they should. They're just catching up when they're networking with someone. They don't have any sense of urgency of, hey, I need to get things done. Whereas when we condense it to a 4-day work week, we see Parkinson's law that work expands to the time given really enacted, and people do their highest level things within their jobs or as entrepreneurs. And so if I said to you, you have to work 1 fewer day a week, are you going to do the best 15 things in those days? Or are you going to do the worst 15 things? You're going to do the best and you're going to drop the ball, which is the magic of it, that it really shows you the areas that you naturally want to drop the ball. You naturally want to outsource or take off of your plate, but maybe you haven't said to yourself, I'm going to preserve that extra energy for myself so that I can keep doing that highest level work. So it forces you to become more professional and to work on the highest level things within your role.
And I think it'll force better communication in the context of what is falling off, why these things are less important. That's why they're not getting done. And it'll force some conversations that I think aren't happening or haven't been happening.
Yeah. I mean, even when I was in the nonprofit world or even at the community college, there would be these meetings and I would always bring a book with me. I'd show up 2 minutes early because I was always taught, if you're on time, you're late. So I'd show up 2 minutes early. I'd bring a book with me and I'd sit alone for 7 or 8 minutes and just read a book. It's like everyone would show up 5 or 8 minutes late and then they'd often go over and then be late to their next meeting. And we should have a conversation around why is there not a sense of urgency? Why is there no sense of what are we doing here? Why do we have 15 people at this table just to inform them over something we could have sent something on Slack to everybody about? And so having those conversations where if we knew we only had a 4-day work week, let's cut all of our meetings in half or in a third and say, let's do our top level things, get it done and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said 45 is the new 60. Why do we do back-to-back meetings, right? So let's just change it in a blanket way that we're going to, like you said, for Parkinson's law, we're going to make all 60-minute meetings 45 minutes as an experiment, like you said, and let's see how it works. Are we more productive and efficient? Are meetings more organized and have more of a sense of urgency? And give people a break so that they're not late for the next meeting and all that goes along with that, right?
And to feel like you don't have to fill that meeting. We just had a team meeting. We have our monthly team meeting, brought everybody together, started on time. We have a whole team from South Africa. And so we get their side of things done first, kick them out of the meeting. Then we have the consultants and other folks then chat, kick them out, and then move on. Our 60-minute scheduled meeting was done in, I think, 36 minutes yesterday. I'm not going to drag it out to 60 minutes. We don't need to do tons of check-ins. Let's get back to what we really want to work on.
Right. Absolutely. I think this has been a really eye-opening conversation for some people who may be on the side of, I don't really believe this. And so I'm encouraging all of you who are listening to experiment with what you heard today. And why not, right? Even if you don't have to commit to a whole year of an experiment, right? Experiment with it for a month and see and let the data speak for itself. So I love that. What didn't I ask you that you feel is really important and relevant for people on the podcast to hear?
I would say that the big picture flow that we're seeing is first starting internally with our internal inclinations. Because in the past, you go read a productivity book, you try to enact it, you might be working on the wrong things. And so doing that inner work first, and this is mirrored in the book where I walk through these different sections. The second part is then slowing down. We do our best work when we've slowed down, when we've optimized our brains. There's so many emerging neuroscience techniques that we can apply to then in that third phase, absolutely kill it. So that when we do show up at work, we can actually get more done. And there's so many things that we can do using that neuroscience to get more done. Even something as simple as changing your environment for when you're working on different tasks can drop you into flow state significantly faster. So for example, when I was writing the book, every single time I wrote the book, I changed the lighting to a particular lighting in here for the writing. I moved the chair in my room. I had specific headphones I wore only when I was writing the book. And I had a playlist I only listened to when I was writing that book. Whenever I do interviews, I always wear the same shirt, multiples of this shirt, so that I feel like I'm in like interview mode, like, let's go. And so when we create an environment that tells us you're safe, you're ready to go, here, let's do it, your brain can drop into that flow state so much faster. And there's so much of that emerging neuroscience that if we follow that flow of the internal, the slow down, and then the kill it, you just can get so much more done in a shorter period of time.
Cool. Do you have any resources for us, other good books to read around that neuroscience techniques and things like that?
I really love The One Thing. That's a great business book that many people reference in regards to focusing in on getting more done. I would say that from just personal development side, Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul is just a great book around allowing your emotions and history and frustrations to move through you rather than get all locked up inside of you. And as you're kind of cleaner and feel more grounded, you're going to just do better work. Those would be the two that I just absolutely love right now. The third thing is I wrote an article for Harvard Business Review about how to ask your boss for the 4-day work week that goes deep into how to specifically ask your boss for that. So, or if you're a supervisor, walks through that process. So those would be the three, other than obviously my book.
Fantastic. Of course, we'll have your book, we'll have that article and the other things that are linked to the show notes. And lastly, a lot of times people are looking for good resources like you gave in terms of to read. I were to clear everything off of your desktop other than your email and your calendar, and I erased your phone, what would the first apps be that you would add back?
I would say the first apps I would add back would most likely be something to connect with my friends and family, to make sure that that was first and foremost. If we're talking productivity, I would say Trello. I love using Trello for project management. No, I go back. I would add Spotify first thing. Like, I want to jam out to some good tunes before anything else. So yeah.
Awesome. Send me any links of good playlists that you have. I'd be happy to share those
great.
in your notes as well.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Right? Because music is a real productivity enhancement as well, isn't it?
100%. If you think about when did people, just from an evolution standpoint, first start collaborating and creating something that's multiple people that creates one thing? I mean, music meets that. All these people doing something that then collectively becomes its own thing outside of the people. And so from just a human consciousness standpoint, it's a pretty marvelous thing to think about all these humans working together to create like one product together.
That's true. And it's a product that makes people happy.
Yeah, there's so many songs that I just can't help but dance to.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise here. Where can people go find more information about you?
Yeah, so joesanok.com is my primary website for keynotes and for the book. We also have people submitting experiments there. If you're doing any sort of 4-day work week experiment, if you're applying anything from Thursday as the new Friday, we want to know about it. We know that this isn't going to be a shift in society that happens with one Henry Ford. It's going to be all of us working together to say, we're the post-pandemic generation. We want to change things. We have a window of opportunity here for us to be able to shift society towards something healthier than what we had pre-pandemic. And so we're bringing those experiments together over at joesanok.com so that we can learn from each other, grow from each other, and say, wow, like, let's see how other people are applying this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe, for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for listening and being ready to do your first experiment. So I want to hear from you as well. So make sure that you're checking in with Joe and registering your experiments. And also, I want to hear what you guys are doing as well. So please do share it with me, subscribe, share what you've learned from this show, and share it with other people. So thank you all for being here. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.